But Clifford's meagre concessions were, to most observers, nothing more than a sop to nationalist opinion at the time.
I don't think he changed his mind. If he did, there wasn't much evidence, even in that constitution, that he foresaw Nigeria as one political entity within the foreseeable future.
Nevertheless, it was the prospect of seats on the Lagos Council that led Herbert Macaulay to form the Nigerian National Democratic Party. The NNDP took all the seats in the 1923 elections in Lagos, and again in 28 and 33. Macaulay was a gifted orator, and he'd continually challenged the colonial administration over local issues in Lagos. By the 1930s, his stand was to pave the way for a new nationalist movement. The Lagos Youth Movement was the first to demand self-determination. It was founded by Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe.
I introduced the idea of one Nigeria, one Nigeria. And what happened was that in 1938, I was explaining earlier on, it was the Lagos Youth Movement. So I appealed to my colleagues that Lagos was all right. Yes, Lagos is the basis, is the capital, is the capital of Nigeria. And Lagos also is the homeland of many multilingual groups in Nigeria. So that Lagos Youth Movement is all right. But what we wanted was to create a spirit of nationalism. So we should change it from Lagos Youth Movement to Nigerian Youth Movement. It was agreed.
By the 1940s, there was still little communication between educated Nigerians and the colonial government. For the British, seeking out friendship with a Nigerian was considered unsound behavior. Nigerians may have been working daily alongside the British, but that didn't stop them being banned from bars and clubs, a practice which continued up until the 1950s. The British had problems relating to the very people they claimed they'd educated to such a high standard. One British schoolteacher in those early days was Jean Boyd.
I went to dinner parties with the senior district officers and other members of what was then the establishment, and I never met any Nigerians there at all.
World War II was to change attitudes. Many Nigerians fought alongside people from other nations. They experienced the egalitarian influence of war. They absorbed the language of freedom and justice used to fight the oppression of dictatorships. At home and abroad, Nigerian soldiers served as equals together with Europeans. Barriers had broken down under the stress of conflict. After the war, it would be hard to accept the old divisions. A new set of horizons opened, one that included an independent Nigeria. Nigerians felt they'd invested in Britain's war effort. Now Britain should invest in their aspirations.
So we felt that we were not saying something that was strange. It was consistent with the announced policy of the Allied powers, that all peoples were entitled to the right of self-determination. But when we were denied such right, we said no, it couldn't be a government headed by Sir Winston Churchill, because he was present with Roosevelt and Stalin when the Atlantic Charter was prepared. So on that basis, we prepared a blueprint for 15 years to enable Britain to hand over to us over a period of 15 years.
But for Nigerians everywhere, persuading the British would be an uphill task.
And the nationalists knew that they had to fight the British every inch of the way. What I think was significant was that once the nationalists showed that they were able to unite, at least convey the impression that they were willing to work together, the British held out the possibility of choose them.
And so it happened. After a split in the Nigerian youth movement, a new and more cohesive nationalist party was founded, led by Dr. Azikiwe and Herbert Macaulay, the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, the NCNC.
It was decided that we wanted an organization which would be national in outlook, and you should emphasize one country.
Meanwhile, Nigeria's involvement in the war had led to increased demand for her raw materials by the Allies. The country's exports doubled. But even during the war, the British seemed interested in promoting trade that would benefit them rather than Nigeria's economic development. So cash crops were exported to industrialized Britain, but the British didn't develop Nigerian farming, nor did they start any industry. In all, they contributed little to economic growth, whatever their stated policies.
The British, obviously, in claiming that the colonial period was a period of development, it is certainly not true. Because, in fact, even in terms of policy, let alone implementation, they did not pass the Colonial Development and Welfare Act until 1944. And it's only after the Second World War that law and order, as the basic aim of colonial administration, began to give way to some concept of development.
This lack of concern with Nigerian needs was made clear in 1944. The Governor-General, Sir Arthur Richards, proposed a new constitution which would be enacted 3 years later. Although it brought the North into the central legislature, it also set up separate regional councils for the North, East and West. The nationalists were bitterly against the constitution. They said it was being imposed without consulting Nigerians. They attacked the idea of regional councils without legislative powers. As they saw it, it didn't seem much of a step towards self-determination. Dr. Azikiwe led an NCNC protest delegation to London with members from all over Nigeria.
The United Kingdom, as delegates of the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, chosen by our people, in order to demand for a more democratic constitution, to modify 4 laws affecting our lands, minerals and chiefs, and to request the British government to grant us more political responsibility to enable us to take an active part in the management of our affairs within the framework of the British Empire.
But the reason why we opposed it was that they introduced the element of regionalism. They said if we have regionalism, then it means those from the north will feel that they are different from the south, and the south will feel likewise, and those from the east and the west, and will not have that unity of purpose.
The delegation got little response from the British government.
We felt that since Labour was in power, and Labour had promised the colonial territories that they would improve their treaties, that we would be received by Labour as friends. But later we found out that although that was a part of their internal politics, but that they kept to British policy not to grant independence until Britain was willing to grant state.
So the British hadn't changed their position. There was a lively public debate over the constitution. There were some who went along with it. But they were ranged against those like Azikiwe and Macaulay who saw its flaws. For them, the spot simply couldn't be washed away. The first move towards decolonization hadn't promised well for the future. By this time, there were 3 main political forces in the country. The NCNC was becoming increasingly identified with the interests of the East. Egbe Omo Oduduwa, later transformed into the Action Group Party, had its base in the West. and the largest Northern Cultural Association was to become the Northern People's Congress, the NPC, in 1949. These three parties, with their cultural and regional interests, were to dominate Nigerian politics in the years to come. Not surprisingly, there'd be more regional thinking in elections and in the constitutional talks. The colonial legacy was sowing its first seeds of division. After Richards, a new Governor-General decided Nigerians should be given more autonomy. This time, politicians were consulted. The Macpherson Constitution gave more powers to the regional assemblies while maintaining a central legislature. The nationalists felt the transfer of power was still too limited.
The Richards Constitution was amended. We had Macpherson Constitution, which granted us responsibility without power. Power resided in the governor. And under the royal instructions, the governor can veto whatever the cabinet had done.
Though the Constitution was opposed in the South, it would be more widely accepted in the North, which now had equal representation in the Federal Assembly.
It gave each region, for example, the opportunity to develop in its own way, and at the same time was capable of bringing about unity, national unity in the country eventually.
And yet, the extent of Nigeria's regionalized politics was now to become clear. 1951, Nigeria's first general election. All three major parties campaigned. Each won a large majority in its area, the NPC in the north, the Action Group in the west, and the NCNC in the east. Each now had to think in terms of strategic alliances. No single party could govern alone. Party politics and options would take second place to tactical thinking.
You see, taking part in the government of the Federation at the national level brought a new problem to the Action Group. The problem was, were we to cooperate with the North or with the East? So we found ourselves on the horns of a dilemma.
In 1953, a single issue triggered party antagonisms, making the drive for independence uncertain. The northern members of the legislature felt they couldn't support a motion for self-government by 1956 because the North wasn't ready. Emotions ran high. Macpherson's constitution hadn't foreseen that the regions would differ about how much autonomy they should have. A new and lasting solution was needed. The Macpherson model would have to change.
I think that there was a crisis in Nigeria after the 1963 motion for self-government. I think looking back, some people might feel that that motion was unwise and that the southern parties should have been more willing to discuss with the Northern People's Congress and come to some kind of understanding or compromise. But having gone ahead to move the motion against the opposition of the North, the whole future of Nigeria was, as it were, put under question mark. And the only thing that could work was a very loose federation